Have you ever looked at a world map and thought it was just lines and colors? But those lines and colors, they are the first clues to power. For example, why is Russia obsessed with warm water ports? Why does Egypt guard the Suez Canal so fiercely? And why can India and China just get along? The answers are all written on the map. Because where you are shape what you need, what you fear, and how you fight. From ancient empires to modern superpowers, mountains, rivers, deserts, and oceans have dictated the rise and fall of nations. Geography doesn't predict the future, of course, but it does explain why past events happened the way they did. And it shows us the physical limits within which countries must act today. Russia's need for warm water ports isn't a new idea. It's a geographic challenge that has been discussed for centuries, especially in English-speaking literature. A warm water port, ice-free year-round, lets Russia export goods, move its navy, and maintain global influence without being blocked by winter. So today, we're going to look at the ground beneath our feet to understand the battles, the borders, and the balance of global power through the lens of geography. This is Rare Nectar, and this is Uncover the Basic of Geopolitics. You might think geography is just maps, mountains, rivers, and dots where a city should be. But in geopolitics, geography is a tool. The role of geography shifts significantly depending on the field. In cartography, geography is treated as information to be measured and represented. Cartographers choose the right map projections, design symbols, and scales. They use tools like GIS, Geographic Information Systems, to visualize spatial data with precision. In urban planning, geography is used to shape human settlements and infrastructure. The goal here is to design cities and regions that are efficient, sustainable, and livable. Geography helps planners decide where to build roads, housing, and public services based on the physical and environmental realities of the land. In geopolitics, geography becomes a map of power. It explains how a country's physical landscape, its mountains, rivers, and borders shapes its national behavior. Geopoliticians use geography to understand why states form alliances, invade neighbors, or compete for resources. In this context, maps are strategic tools used to locate choke points, buffer zones, and corridors of influence. Geography becomes the stage where global power is negotiated. Now, let's continue with a few key questions. Why did ancient civilizations rise near rivers? Why did global empires form around seas? And why did landlocked countries struggle to grow? All of these questions can be answered by looking at geography, because geography doesn't just look at power, it shapes it. Take the Britain. It's an island separated from Europe by the English Channel. The simple stretch of water give Britain an edge. It could trade globally, defend easily, and avoid many European wars. Now compare it to Poland, flat, open, and in the heart of Europe. It has no natural barriers. That geography made it a corridor of invasions, from Napoleon to Hitler. Geography doesn't choose sides, but it creates constraints. It makes some nations harder to invade and others harder to defend. Here are the examples. The United States has two oceans as barriers. The Amazon makes Brazil hard to unify. The Himalayas isolate India and China. And Africa's rivers, full of waterfalls and sharp bends, made international trade and unity difficult for centuries. These are not just facts. They are the invisible hands behind decisions, alliances, and conflicts. Let's zoom in on Russia. Why does Russia keep pushing west and south? One key reason is fear of encirclement. Encirclement happens when a country is surrounded by rival powers, military alliances, or hostile forces on multiple sides. It can be geographical, bordered by enemies or competitors, military, facing enemy bases or missile systems on several fronts, or political, isolated by unfriendly neighbors or alliances. If you are surrounded, you have to defend multiple frontiers at once. It's like being in the middle of a chessboard with hostile pieces closing in from every direction. You have fewer safe moves and more pressure. Another reason Russia pushes south is the pursuit of warm water ports, but this idea mainly flourishes in English-speaking academic and journalistic literature. Many scholars now argue that this narrative is overstated, even a geopolitical myth. It oversimplifies Russian strategy and overlooks modern realities. Russia has adapted with Arctic infrastructure, nuclear submarines, and pipelines that reduce reliance on naval trade routes. But dismissing the one water port idea entirely risks missing the bigger picture, because while specific narratives may be outdated, the logic behind them still holds that geography still matters. The Russian heartland is flat and exposed, with long borders and few natural defenses. To create strategic depth, Russia seeks buffer zones like Ukraine, Belarus, and the Caucasus. A buffer zone is a territory, often weaker or natural, placed between great powers to reduce tension or prevent conflict. For Russia, Ukraine acted as a critical buffer, a space between itself and NATO. But as Ukraine leaned westward, the buffer began to vanish. And when the barrier disappeared, Russia struck. Because geography explains not just what a nation wants, but what it fears. Now here's the twist. In today's world, planes fly over borders and satellites see everything. So is geography still relevant? The answer is yes, because even today, terrain still decides strategy. You can't fly pipelines, you can't move oil fields, and armies still need land to cross, supply lines to follow, and choke points to control. So, while technology evolves, geography remains the stage where global power plays out. In short, geography is the foundation of power in geopolitics. It determines security and defense, access to resources, trade and connectivity, and strategic influence. It doesn't predict the future, but it limits the options. And those limits, they shape what comes next. We have seen how Russia pushes outward not only for conquest but for securing buffer zones. But Russia isn't alone. Across the world, geography limits what nations can do and where they can go. This is what we call a geography trap, a core concept explored by Tim Marshall in his book Prisoners of Geography. His thesis, nations are not free to act whoever they want. They are shaped and sometimes even trapped by their mountains, rivers, deserts, and neighbors. In other words, what drives national behavior isn't just politics, it's terrain. Let's see the case one, the Himalayas, a towering wall of rock stretching 2,400 kilometers across Asia. On one side, there is India, and on the other side, there is China. Two of the world's largest militaries, two rising powers, but if you look at the map, you will see why they haven't gone to full-scale war. The mountains' slow movement, their free supply chains. You can't send tanks through 6,000-meter peaks. Even infantry movement is slow, dangerous, and limited by brutal terrain. This is a classical natural border, not drawn by treaties, but by geology. And yet it doesn't guarantee peace. Mountains can block armies, but they can't block ambition. In geopolitics, geography doesn't stop people, it just forces them to find new ways around it. Today, satellites track troop movements, drones monitor borders, and in 2020, India and China clashed in the Galwan Valley, a reminder that geographic barriers don't eliminate friction. When land becomes too difficult to conquer, nations often look to something else, like water. And that brings us to the next case, the Jordan River. In dry regions, water isn't just survival, it's power. And in the Middle East, the Jordan River sits at the center of that power. It's a lifeline for Israel, Jordan, and the Palestinian territories, and it reflects the region's deeply political geography. But it's more than just a river, it's the lifeblood of millions. It supports farmers, it provides drinking water to cities, and when the river shrinks, tensions rise. This brings us to a key concept hydropolitics, the geopolitics of water. Because in arid regions, who controls the river often controls that region. Israel has built dams and diverted parts of the Jordan's flow. Palestinians in the West Bank face strict water access. And Jordan, already one of the most water-scarce nations in the world, watches its levels drop year after year. Let's bring us these ideas together. In both cases, mountains and rivers, geography doesn't just form the backdrop to conflict. It's the part of the conflict itself. The Himalayas aren't just scenery. They define where troops can move, where alliances are built, and what's worth defending. The Jordan River isn't just water. It's a strategic asset, a geopolitical fault line, and a persistent source of tension. And here's the deeper takeaway. Geography doesn't just divide countries, it defines what they fight over. As Tim Marshall puts it, leaders are prisoners of geography. Even the most ambitious leaders must bow to the mountains, deserts, and rivers that shape their borders. So before you judge why a nation acts cautiously or aggressively, look at the map. You might find the reason carved into the earth itself. Tim Marshall shows us how mountains and rivers can trap nations, forcing them into a defensive posture. But sometimes geography doesn't trap you, it frees you. That's where Peter Zeihan's theory begins. His core idea is geography doesn't just hold countries back, it gives some a natural head start. According to Zeihan, geography creates winners and losers. And the winners, they are often the ones with rivers, coastlines, and defensible terrain. Let's see the case one with the United States. It's surrounded by two oceans, it has no hostile neighbors, and inside, a network of navigable rivers and the largest piece of arable farmland in the world, the Midwest. That means goods move cheaply through inland waterways. Borders are naturally protected. It can feed itself, trade easily, and defend at low cost. Geography is why the US became a superpower before it ever built a military. It had the right map long before it had the might. But how does this tie back to the powers we have been following, like Russia? Peter Zeihan argues that Russia is geographically insecure. No internal river systems like America. No defensible borders, just flat plains that invading armies can sweep across. No warm water ports to project power year-round. That's why, in Zeihan's view, Russia acts aggressively not for expansionist glory, but out of strategic insecurity. Its geographic position makes it reactive, not dominant. Instead of confidentially expanding like the US, which protected by two oceans, Russia responds to threats. It invades neighbors like Ukraine to create buffers, pushes south to access warm water ports, and constantly fears encirclement from NATO. Now let's see the case 3, Turkey choke point control. Turkey doesn't have vast farmland like the US, but it controls something powerful, the Bosporus and Dardanelles Straits. These narrow waterways are called choke points, and whoever controls choke points often controls trade and tension. In this case, the Bosporus and Dardanelles are the only sea route from Russia's Black Sea ports to the Mediterranean. But Turkey controls it, and that means every Russian ship must pass under Turkey's eyes. A narrow waterway can shift global power, because choke points don't just block enemies, they attack access to the world. Peter Zeihan flips the map upside down. Instead of seeing geography as a kid, he sees it as a key. The countries that win aren't always the richest or most advanced. They are the ones whose land gives them an edge before the game even begins. In geopolitics, strength isn't just built, it's inherited. Some nations are born with river highways and ocean moats. Others must fight geography every step of the way. How to read the map like a geopolitician. We have explored how mountains divide nations and how choke points can empower them. But there's one more essential skill for everyone seeking to understand global affairs: the ability to read a map like a strategist. Because to a geopolitician, a map is not just a record of locations, it's a blueprint of vulnerabilities, ambitions, and inevitable confrontations. It doesn't just show where things are, it reveals why events unfold the way they do. So let's practice with Russia. Start by asking, what does the land look like? Russia is huge, But that size is misleading. Most of it is flat, especially in the west. No mountains, no natural walls. To a geopolitician, flat line is a threat. It means enemies can invade easily, and it's hard to defend. Now look west of Russia. What do you see? Europe, NATO allies, open terrain, and no deep buffer. That's why Russia sees Ukraine and Belarus as more than neighbors. They are buffer zones, soft space between Russia and the West. So when Ukraine leaned toward NATO, Russia didn't just see politics, it saw its vulnerabilities being exposed. Second question, where's the water? Russia is a massive land power, but it's mostly frozen. Its northern coast, frozen half the year. Its eastern ports, far from major trade routes. That's why warm water ports matter so much. In the south, Crimea gives access to the Black Sea. From there, Russia can reach the Mediterranean. That's global access and why Crimea is so strategic. When Russia invaded Crimea in 2014, it wasn't just politics, it was about geography, securing access to the world's oceans. Third question, who controls the choke points? Even if Russia reaches the Mediterranean, it must pass through the Turkish Straits, the Bosporus, and Dardanelles. These are narrow sea gates controlled by NATO member Turkey. That means Russia's fleet could be trapped in a crisis. So what would you do if you were the Russian president? Alright, if I were the Russian president, I would look for a base outside NATO control. One that offers access to global trade routes. A place that can be reached from Crimea. And is in a region stable enough to build long-term influence. At a glance, your options seem limited. But one place stands out. Syria. Thanks to cooperation with Iran and Iraq, Russia can fly through a friendly corridor through Caspian Sea and then fly to Iran, to Iraq, and then Syria. It's not guaranteed in every crisis, but it works, at least for now. And Russia has been building influence there for years. Today, Russia has an airbase in Khmeimim and a naval base in Tartus. Together, they give Russia another way out during a crisis. If you are lucky enough, you can also pass military cargo through the Turkish Straits, but under the Montreux Convention, Turkey can limit naval passage during wartime, especially for non-Black Sea states. Even Russia's own Black Sea fleet can be restricted under some conditions. Finally, zoom out and ask, what would I do if I led Russia? You would feel vulnerable from the West. You would want buffers, you would want reliable ports, and you would use energy as leverage. In short, a map doesn't just show you where things are, it shows you why countries act the way they do. Maps aren't just for navigation, they reveal strategy, ambitions, and limitation. And once you start seeing the world this way, you will notice every border, every move, and every conflict has a shape behind it. We live in an age of satellites, fiber optics, and AI. So you might wonder, isn't geography becoming less important? After all, you can trade stocks, launch drones, or destabilize a regime from a keyboard. Borders are digitized, culture is global, power travels at the speed of code. But let me tell you this, when Russia invades Ukraine, it doesn't happen in the cloud, it happens on roads, through forests, plains, and ports. When China invests billions in Africa, it chooses where to build railways and ports, not just what to fund. When the US deploys its navy, it sails through choke points, the Strait of Hormuz, the Suez Canal, and the Taiwan Strait. Even in the digital age, physical geography still decides what's possible and what's not. Geography doesn't tell leaders what to do, but it tells them where the risks are, where the pressure builds, and where the next move might come from. Think of it like the rules of a board game. Technology changes the pieces, but the map, it is still the board. And if you know the board, you start to see the patterns. That's why understanding geography isn't just for generals or presidents. It's for everyone who wants to read global risks, for students who want to understand history, and for citizens who want to make sense of the world today. Geography doesn't just describe the land, it constrains, empowers, and guides the decisions of national leaders. In geopolitics, it becomes a lens to anticipate what's next and understand why. So, what have we learned? Geography isn't just about where countries are, it's about why they behave the way they do. We saw how flat terrain is vulnerable, how mountain ranges can protect but also isolate, how rivers and choke points don't just shape borders, they shape power. Because beneath every tension point there is terrain, a route, a resource, and understanding that it turns noise into knowledge. But remember, geography isn't the full story, it's where the story begins. And if you can read the land, you can start reading a country's next move. Alright, subscribe to Rare Nectar. This was just the beginning. Next time, we'll go deeper. This is Rare Nectar, uncovering the global reaches, power, and history. See you next time.